Hey guys, and welcome to the With a Bang podcast. In today's episode, I have something very special prepared for you guys. But before I get into that, let me set the scene. A while ago, a friend of mine reached out for me to come onto one of his projects to help handle the operations side of things so that he could focus more on the vision and the leadership. I was so excited because it literally seemed like the perfect fit. We're both friends already, and we're both highly capable individuals, so it literally felt like nothing could go wrong. However, to our surprise, as we got going, we found ourselves struggling to communicate and often stepping on each other's toes. It came to the point where we even began to wonder, maybe we aren't that perfect of a fit. Maybe we can't work well together. It was at that point that I was walking into one of my favorite bookstores, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a tiny little book. That is how I discovered Tandem Leadership: How Your Number Two Can Make You Number One by Gina Catalano. Guys, this book follows the story of a CEO named Marcus whose business is growing way faster than he can handle. With the help of his mentor, Bill, he learns how to find, hire, and work with the right COO, all while also trying to maintain balance in his personal life. This book was so good that I literally finished it in one day. And after I finished it, I was so intrigued and so excited that I just felt like I needed to share it with everyone. And so I literally went onto LinkedIn at 4 a.m. in the morning and I sent Gina a message asking her to come onto my podcast. Luckily, she agreed to the interview, and that's exactly what I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. Now, you may be wondering, okay, Elsie, this all sounds well and good, but I'm not a CEO or I'm not a COO. How does this apply to me? Well, even if you're not a CEO-COO duo, we all play the number one or the number two position in different areas of our lives. Be it in your marriage or in your friendships or while parenting your children, whatever the case may be, we all need teamwork. And I really think that Tandem Leadership is a great book to help you learn how to get further, faster together. Without further ado, enjoy the episode. Today, I am so excited because I am joined by fractional COO, Gina Catalano, CEO of Venture Solutions. And today we are going to be discussing about her book, Tandem Leadership, which I actually came across a couple weeks ago. And I kid you guys not, it changed my life. Thank you so much, Gina, for joining me today.
Oh, Elsie, thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to meet you and to be here with your listeners.
Thank you. So I wanted to just get straight into it because I want people to be able to get a concept of what tandem leadership is and really get a grasp on how it can really apply to their lives. So for those who do not know, what is a concept of tandem leadership and how did you come up with it?
So I've been a consultant and a coach for the last 20 years. And before that, I worked in companies being a COO or director of operations or a general manager, but basically the number two person to either the president, the CEO, or the owner. And it occurred to me that we, especially as entrepreneurialism has grown, we talk a lot to the founders and the CEOs, but there's a lot of people that pull things together. And for a lot of CEOs or founders, it's a real struggle to grow their business because there's only so much you can do yourself. And how you do it as a founder, owner, CEO yourself isn't how it's going to work when you add people to your team. And so what I realized, I was seeing folks struggle more and more with this. And, you know, I had always wanted to write a book. I had been writing since I was very young, and I'd always wanted to write a book. And I thought, at the time, it would be a great way to introduce myself to people and attract clients that were interested in doing the kind of work that I do.
So in Tandem Leadership, you actually present the idea of the relationship between a CEO and a COO using the analogy of a bicycle, the front wheel and the back wheel. Can you tell me a little bit about how you connected those two?
So I have been riding bicycles since I was very young, and to the point where I'm the oldest of 6 children. And when I was a kid, the oldest gets the bumps and the bruises sometimes. And I wanted to start riding really young, and my folks said, no, I wasn't old enough. So I would go to the neighbors around the corner and start riding a bike, because it meant freedom. Bike, being able, you can go so much faster, you can go so much further. And it occurred to me when I was thinking about this idea of tandem leadership is that, the front wheel is really, the visionary. It's the person that, guides, but without any support from the back or any motor from the back, you're not going to go anywhere. So you can have all the vision in the world, and if you have no back wheel, you're not going any far. You're not going very far. And you can have all the power in the back. Right. And if you don't know where you're going, you're just going in circles. And they're independent, but they're interdependent, right? They're separate things, but they're very interdependent. And we humans love a good metaphor. Yeah. And it just seemed, and it felt very real. It felt very home to me, like in terms of doing it. And it was an easy thing for people to understand how important it was for those two things to work together.
Absolutely. So like you mentioned not too long ago, a lot of CEOs, they start something. Many people are solo entrepreneurs and they're doing a lot of this stuff on their own. And as things grow, they need a team. They need to surround themselves with people that can help them bring that vision to life. In your experience, what would you say are some of the common obstacles or mistakes that keep CEOs from taking that step, that keep CEOs from expanding and trusting others to come on?
That's such a great question, and it has a lot of layers to it. I think the number one thing I think is that when we grow, we assume that when we bring people on, they're going to do things exactly the way we would do them. And how we do it, and a lot of CEOs I know, or founders, they're super efficient, right? Because they're doing a bazillion different things. And I know you have your own entrepreneurial ventures out there, so you understand this. Like, you're always like, how can I do 7 things at once?
Right.
But as you grow, and I come out of manufacturing, you want repeatability. You don't want to make one bicycle one way and then another bicycle another way. And then they all have to be the same, right? They have to have the same kind of quality in them. So the people that can sustain a system typically aren't the people that created the system, or vice versa. The people that created the system really struggle a lot, and they're different people. So what I often tell people, CEOs or whatever, is that what really needs to happen at the beginning is define what kind of outcomes you want. Like, define what you want, and then tell people, and then, have a general idea, and then let people, your team, your number 2, who's typically more focused on execution than you are, they're more than help them create the systems and the processes that will allow the company to thrive. And it's not that CEOs founders aren't good at it. They're just not good at creating the ones that actually are sustainable by other people.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. In that kind of teamwork setting, then, I imagine that communication would be very important. Now, you've worked with a lot of clients, and you, of course, run your own venture solutions. And I was just wondering, what are some big lessons that you've learned in terms of communication to keep everyone in the loop and keep everyone going along in the right direction? Because like you said, everyone does it a different way. And how are you able to merge those things together?
I love that. It's so funny. I was just having this conversation with one of my clients the other day. It's an old book. It's called Leading Change by John Kotter. And John Kotter has the Kotter Institute in Harvard. And or he came out of Harvard. I think he has his own company now. But he has like the 7 rules for change. And one of them is, and this is a long time ago, it was 25 years ago, he said, most leaders undercommunicate by a factor of 100 or 1,000. Wow. So that was 25 years ago, before we have all these inputs that we have all the time. And so we as leaders, or we as founders or entrepreneurs, we're like thinking about things like 24/7. How do I solve this problem? How do I do this? Our people may be thinking about it, but they're not thinking about it as much as we are. And oftentimes, we're thinking about it so much, we often think we've over communicated it, like we've communicated it all the time, right? So to me, communication is the number one thing, and you can't over communicate. Like my big joke is when they start making fun of you about you saying the same thing over and over again, then you know that your point has come across, right? And so it is really, communication is really important. I set up I have like a form that I use when I'm telling a new CEO or CEO when they're onboarding or they're trying to work together, that really helps them walk through all the things that they need to be like, who's doing what? When are we going to meet? Really basic things that, especially now, a lot of our entrepreneurs and founders have never really worked in a job because entrepreneurship is so available to so many people that the basic structures that I grew up with don't exist for a lot of people. And so just super basic things about putting that together is really helpful, I think, for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was going to say, we have spoken quite a bit about, the CEO and COO role. Now, these are two generally quite powerful roles in a company. And sometimes, for you to take on that role, both people are in some capacity leaders. Now, there can often be some sort of power play, or how do you find that people can avoid stepping on toes or, not making one feel neglected, or feel like somebody's overstepping their boundaries in terms of those positions? Because even just separating what the CEO and the CEO does, it's all kind of running the company.
It is. And I think knowing what your role is super important. So I think, when I've worked with people in that role as a COO, I think, especially now, I think I'm pretty good at figuring out what somebody needs because I've done it for a while. But what I would do in the beginning is we'd sit down and say, okay, this is what our decision matrix is. This is where I can make a decision on my own. This is where you can make a decision on your own. One of the things that I love about, I'll send it to you so you can put it in the show notes. There's a handout that I think that you can load, but it's basically saying, what the CEO owes the COO and what the COO owns the CEO. And I don't want people to get hung up by the titles. It's just like the number one person and the number two person based on the hierarchy. And it often is an owner or founder, and then someone that's there to help them. Great. And so one of the common things is you hire a COO, a number two person, and they're now running your team. And then you go around them and start talking to the team without consulting the COO or your number two first. So you owe that person to always work with, your number two. Similarly, typically the CEO is the person that's in the spotlight. Right. So if you're a number two person, most of the good ones, they don't really need to be the person that's in the spotlight. They're like into getting things done. They're into making things run better. It's not that they're not strong or they don't have a good sense of self or a good ego. It's just that they don't crave to be out in front of the public typically. And so I think more than ever, it's making sure that you go through those boundaries about who owes whom what in terms of doing that. And it's a mutual respect thing as well.
Yeah. Relationship can be very, very important, especially.
Yeah. It's a lot like your work marriage, right? Doing things.
Exactly. This was just a little bit of a quick question because now I'm curious. Being a CEO sometimes, because you do that fractionally, but being the CEO in your own company, how would you say that Gina is different in both of those roles?
It's an interesting dichotomy. It truly is, because when I started my own company, I'd always taken, I don't know if you're familiar with StrengthsFinder, but responsibility is super high for me. Right. So I'd always taken a lot of ownership wherever I had worked. Right. When I was in the not-for-profit world, it didn't matter. But the difference is creating intellectual property as a CEO and thinking about holding myself accountable. I have when I work with other clients and I'm their CEO, I have no problem holding folks accountable, but I'm in that same position in my own company. And I think sometimes I'm like, I would rather work on other people's stuff than work on my own stuff.
Same. Yeah.
And I think it's just my natural tendency is I get super excited and charged up by other people's ideas. That's why I love this job. I mean, I love doing it because other people's ideas are just fascinating to me.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I really, really do resonate with that. So the other thing that I did want to ask is, in your book, you did stress the importance of a CEO making sure that they get somebody who complements their skills. A lot of the time when people are hiring, they kind of like go with the flashiest resume, the person who seems to have it all, and you just assume that it's going to work perfectly for your company. I actually am subscribed to your newsletter, and I saw the example of I believe it was 1-800-GOT-JUNK that you shared. Yes. And how they brought in this amazing person from Starbucks and they almost went bankrupt. Tell me a little bit more about that importance of finding somebody with complementary skills and not getting lost in the flashiness of a resume.
Absolutely. And I think for that example is that and I think in the book, I call it hiring the right person for the wrong job.
Yes.
So like without ever like you hire these great people and you get super excited. I mean, entrepreneurs by nature get charged up by being around other dynamic people.
Right.
And a lot of times their enthusiasm is super infectious. And it's not so much an ego thing. They're just like, oh my gosh, somebody who finally understands me. I'm super excited about working with this person. But what ends up happening is that you can often hire someone who's just like you. And then if you hire someone that's just like you, there's going to be gaps oftentimes. And so it takes some soul searching, like the example that you talked about, where he went out and he really sat down and thought about, in a perfect world, who would really complement me? And what was interesting about his story is that he sent it out to his network. He said, I think this is who I'm looking like for. Does this make sense? And 2 or 3 people referred to him the person that eventually became his COO. Right. And when that process, he found he really wanted to do culture and he really wanted to do visionary things. And he didn't want to do the operations things, where his very first COO was really like a co-visionary, which is common in a startup, right? Like you're both, but I think his comment was something like, you had 2 ADD. We were growing so fast you couldn't notice, but we had sort of 2 ADD co-founders, or not, they weren't really co-founders, CEO and CO, and things were falling through the cracks because somebody does need to be responsible for all of those things. And so the thing that I would say is this is what I love to do. This is what I'm great at. And then take that. I believe everything can be solved in a matrix. I was a math major in college. Nice. And then figure out where your gaps are from there. Because we a lot of times, especially in I think North America, we always are trying to fix our deficits, when I think sometimes we should just really lean into the things that we're really great at and enjoy.
Right.
And accelerate that, because you're going to go way faster and much further on that.
You mentioned briefly that you actually have some experience in the not-for-profit space. And
I do.
And now you work with a lot of people in more so the for-profit and in the business side of things. I was just wondering, tell me a little bit more about your non-for-profit experience and how you find the two are different navigating.
So I worked originally in a not-for-profit that did what they called it industrial extension. So it's basically consulting for it was in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, when the manufacturing sector was getting really decimated in North America. And so there's programs that sprung up all over the world, actually, about helping small manufacturers be more competitive. And so the not-for-profit world has different funding structures. But what's interesting to me about it, at the end of the day, I see more and more. I'm actually a chair of a board of a not-for-profit educational institution in Tucson. And then I have some not-for-profit clients. And at the end of the day, it's about a strong mission, a strong vision, and it's about servicing whoever your clients or customers are, supporting those folks.
Right.
And I think the difference is how you get your money. And so you have maybe multiple layers, right? Like you might have a funder and then you have clients. The clients may not give you money, but your funders want to know that you're serving those clients.
Right.
In a for-profit business, the clients most of the time directly pay you, or the customers directly pay you, or the distributors. So if you think about that, still that kind of same circle, you have to do a good job measuring client satisfaction
Right.
and services and results. And then the funding comes. I used to tell my team, without any money, there isn't any mission.
It's true.
And so, right. And so you can be the most purpose-driven human. And I do believe when you are, money will come.
Right.
But if you do have to pay attention to the funders, that means you still need to execute whatever services, you still need to pay your bills, you still need to file those grant reports or whatever tax documents that the government requires so you can keep your status. Those are just the basics of staying in business,
Right.
whether you're a not-for-profit or not. So I think there's more and more collaboration or similarities than there has ever been.
Right.
It's just understanding who your stakeholders are and who you're trying to serve.
Wow. I've never heard it explained like that. If anything, I find that people really try to hone in on the differences, and this isn't this and this isn't that. But it's really nice to have somebody really say, at the end of the day, it's the same circle that you're working within. And that is absolutely very, very true. So personally, I am not necessarily a CEO or COO. And like you said, let's not get hung up on the titles. It really is just a number one, number two position thing. But I'm a student, and still I resonated so much with your book. I really, really did. Did you find that a lot of people who aren't necessarily in business resonated with the book? And in other areas of your life, do you find that the concept of tandem leadership has helped you?
Oh, those are great questions. Yes, I do think people, because it's a story.
Yes.
It's told in a narrative, like a mini novel or a fable. And it's short for all you folks out there. It's very short because
Very
CEOs don't. It was the idea that they could take it on a plane.
Yeah.
And they could read it. They could read it on a plane, right? Like, and it's small enough it fits in your jacket pocket.
It really is.
Yeah. And I actually had one CEO reach out to me. He said, "Would you mind sending me another copy?" Because I had this pre-release copy that I had sent at a conference. He said, "Someone took my suit coat at a airport and it was tucked inside a suit coat." So, and just a delightful guy. And so it ended up being a way for me to get to meet him. Like, I lost my chain of thought. Oh, so yes, people I think have resonated with it because I think it's the human story of wanting success, wanting things to work out, wanting to be a good person in the world and do good things, and knowing that very few of us can do anything on our own completely separate.
That's true.
And I think if anything, the last few years has taught us, family, a lot of my clients have realized, not that they didn't, but when something's taken away from you, like the ability to go to an office, the ability to serve your customers, the ability to even see your family, all those things are really important. And so I think, balancing that, I think that for sure, I think that that's definitely, a lot of people have told me that they just really liked it, even if they weren't in business.
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to circle back to, would you say that it has helped in other areas of your life personally?
Yes. That's a great question. I think that, I look at, I'm a wife, and I think that one of the things is understanding, my husband's now retired, that he does a lot of things in our family that I used to do. And so, it's been great because, I'm not there always to say, this is the way you should do it.
Right.
And a lot of times I've just become realize that it's just, he's doing it his own way, as long as it gets done. And the example is the laundry. I would do it differently, right? But at the end of the day, all the laundry is hung up in my closet and it's folded and put away. So I'm not, I'm done with that, right? Like that's, right. And I think that's a good lesson in and of itself, about that we all have times in our life where we have to let stuff go in order to reach that next thing that we want to be able to get to. We can't hold on with both hands and cross a river.
Can't do it. So like you mentioned, the book is written like a story. It's written narratively. And you talked about how when you were younger, you did want to write a lot, although you weren't given the opportunity to do so. Would you say that that played a part in you choosing to do it in the narrative style? Did you start out trying to do it in the more traditional business book sense of step 1, step 2, step 3?
That's exactly what happened. I was so stuck. So I was part of a book writing coaching program, primarily for coaches who were sharing their particular expertise as part of a product. And it was and I loved the book writing process. It was one of the most favorite times of my life because I was very disciplined. I had this whole thing. I got up and went to the gym in the morning, and I actually would take my laptop with me, and I'd spend an hour or two at Starbucks at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was really quiet. I'd write there for a little bit in our little town. And then when I got stuck, I'd go home, and that drive would help jog my memory. I'd write some more, and then I would finally and then when I get stuck, I would take a shower, and that would jog my memory. And I was typically done writing every day by about noon.
Wow.
And so it was awesome. So I tried writing the first 2 or 3 chapters, and it was horrible. It was unreadable. It was the worst writing ever. And that's not super motivating, right? And so I literally, I think, wrote throughout the first 3 chapters of my book and just had to start over. And I just got this idea that wouldn't it be fun to tell it as a story? And I don't really remember why. There are other books like that out there in the world. It's not uncommon. And when I did, it literally flowed. I got stuck a few times, but it was the story that was meant to come out for me, truly.
Wow. And I'm so grateful that you did, because I remember, folks, for those of you who haven't gotten the book yet, just get it. Just get it. Whoever you are, definitely just get it. Because I remember reading this and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm Gary. Or, oh my gosh, my friend is totally Marcus. Or like, can we get a Bill in our lives? Like, how can we get a Bill? And it just even gets so much easier to talk about the book because you can refer to these characters. You see it actually played out. It's that applied learning that we rarely see, because sometimes, you see, do this, do this, do this. And it's great in the theoretical, but it's like, how do I apply this practically to my own situation? And so I thought that was a brilliant choice. Since we're already on the topic of the authoring process for you, I just wanted to say, so you have actually written 2 books, and I see them in the back of your screen, Tandem Leadership and Changing Lanes. Can we expect some more books from you? Is it something that you're potentially considering doing more of, or would you say that you're done and you've given what you can?
I would love to write another book, and I actually like to write another book because I've gotten requests for it. A book from the position of the number 2 person.
I would love that.
Yeah. So that's, I think, and it might even just be something that I quick self-publish and get out into the world. But that would be the thing that I would really like to work. I still would like to write a novel too. I live in this really quirky area of Southern Arizona, and there's just so many characters here. And so every day I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that would be a great scene for a novel. So maybe 2 more books. So we'll see. We'll see if I can get that done in the next couple of years.
Okay, that would be amazing, because you really are a fantastic writer, and I do want you to know that. And
thank you.
I got through your book in one day. I remember, and it's been a while since I've read, but the moment I picked it up, I could not put it down. And so, yes, definitely. We're getting towards the end of the podcast, but I just had a last few questions for you. In terms of mentorship, you seem somebody who is really into legacy and just giving back and really helping people. And so I was just thinking, would you say that you would count these books as part of your legacy, or as part of something that you hope that young people will be able to take and apply in their lives, even years to come?
I hadn't until you brought it up. But that is one of the great things about writing a book or having a podcast, even. Yes. I mean, it becomes a public record.
It does.
And I had thought of, what was amazing when you and I connected is that I didn't understand or think that my writing would resonate so much with someone like yourself, who has so much energy and and is a lot younger than my typical clients. That being said, I actually do a lot of mentoring or in the startup community here. And I enjoy that a lot because the energy around that is so amazing. And so I think about anybody who wants to start anything in their life, I'm glad that this will be around to help somebody, even if the circumstances aren't super, the actual specifics of the book aren't super identifiable, or relatable, right? In terms of, somebody starting a little shelf manufacturing company maybe someday we won't have shelves.
Maybe one, it's true. It's very possible.
Yeah. So I think it does, I think about having great grandchildren and knowing that, Nana wrote a book. So Nana wrote a book. So I think we can leave, especially in the last few years, I think legacy is not a bad thing.
It's true. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would you say?
Oh my gosh, a bazillion things. So I'm a hyper responsible human. And I think, and which has served me super well in the roles that I have done. But I think I would have told myself when I was younger, get in a little bit more trouble.
Oh, wow.
And take a few, I've always been a risk taker, but I think I wouldn't have always been I would have maybe been the kid that snuck into the pool and jumped in after hours or done a few more of those things. Now, my grandchildren do not do that, but my future great grandchildren. But I think I would have, because I think that you are only young once. And I think it's just really a fun thing to be able to try as many new things as you can.
Well, that's amazing. And I'm going to put that in my little back pocket for sure.
That's I see Elsie being taken away after breaking and entering the local community pool.
Toronto girl just found in that public pool after hours. No, absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an absolutely amazing conversation. For those who, have heard about you for the first time or they want to get to know more about you, where can people reach you? How can they get in contact with what you're doing?
So I have a website. It's gcatalano.com. There's a Gina Catalano already.com. So believe it. It's actually, Catalano is a really common Italian name. No one knows that.
Oh, wow.
And so gcatalano.com. And I'm actually, for your listeners, and we can put the information in the show notes.
Yes.
They'll be able to download like the first chapter of the book just to check it out and see if it's something that they would like. I'm on Instagram. I'm not super prolific at Gina M Catalano. And so that's probably the easiest places to connect with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. She's also on LinkedIn. Gina Catalano.
I am on LinkedIn.
That is where I reached out to her, and she's super nice, super sweet. So definitely check her out. You will not regret it. Thank you so much, Gina. Honestly, once again, it has been such a pleasant conversation, and I look forward to following you and following what you do and reading those last 2 books.
Thanks so much, Elsie. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I actually look forward to following you because I want to see the trajectory that you continue on. So thank you again so much. It's been a delight.
Absolutely.